Chapter 5 to 6. Morning eventually came and I found myself heading towards the guild in my casual clothes, which now included a black leather jacket with white outlining the edges along with my regular white long-sleeve shirt, black pants, black shoes, and my hair let down so it wasn't sticking up. I was going to do some final quest preparations with Luna at the guild. That dream I had was strange. All I could see was fire, so maybe the monster or people harassing the residents use fire. That it was no coincidence that the night before I left for a quest I get an ominous dream. There's no way I'm ignoring another one of these dreams, or I guess visions. Last time I ignored something this ominous. People died approaching the guild doors. I could already hear yelling on the inside. Letting out which felt like my 100th sigh. This month I entered the guild. Once inside I saw Aqua swinging Luna by a strap from the front of her outfit. How is my reward so small? Luna looked sheepish and started to get dizzy. I'm sorry, but most of what you got during the harvest was lettuce. Aqua's shaking intensified and I decided it was time I stepped in by grabbing Aqua from the scruff of her shirt and turned her to look into my eyes. If you are done complaining, I have business with her, I say, gesturing to Luna while giving Aqua a slight glare. She pouted as I let her go and she went back to Kazuma and her group, which she almost immediately started asking Kazuma for money. Luna then thanked me. Thank you. I was starting to get dizzy. Think nothing of it, I'm here to get the final preparations for the request I will be heading to today. I just need to hand you a few papers to give to the shipmaster at the nearest port town. She then leaned over her desk and handed me some papers which I sent to my gate. I'm surprised you're not wearing your armor. I thought it would be nice to forego it for now until I head into battle. Well, it's a nice change. You look nice, she said with a smile, which I gave a small hum in response. Oh, I almost forgot. She clapped her hands together. I need to give you your reward for the cabbage quest. If you could follow me, I can't exactly bring it all out, and I know you can put it in that portal thing of yours. I nodded as she led me to some back room in the guild where there was a large sack presumably filled with coins and cash, which I dismissed into my gate. Your reward was 2 million Eris, she said with a smile. For the cabbages? I could hardly believe it. Yes, holding back a snarky response, she led me out of the back room. I still think you should bring a party for this quest. I heard a whole party got wiped out and they were decent adventurers, she said with a slight frown. I gave her a side glance as we made it back to the main hall as I let out a small chuckle. You forget who I am, I say while grinning. She then sighed. Yes, you're the great Gilgamesh and no mongrel will get the best of you. We both let out a chuckle. Are you leaving right now? I will be shortly. I have to speak with Darkness as she will be watching my house. I heard about you buying a house. Congratulations, by the way. I nodded in thanks as I approached Darkness and her group. She noticed my approach. Gilgamesh, are you leaving for your quest? Yes, I came to say bye as well as talk about you watching my house. This got Kazuma's attention. Thanks again for letting us stay there for a bit. He got up and gave a light bow. I couldn't stand sleeping in that stable anymore. I got a lot of money for the cabbage quest, so I should be able to get a place soon. Think nothing of it. I wanted to remind you that my house better be spotless when I return. He nodded. Darkness has a key and she will only be letting you in at night as I don't want people there all day. They all nodded. Darkness then noticed something. I see you're not wearing your armor today. I wanted to start dressing more casual when not on quests, and the place I'm going to is a resort island which I must reach by ship, so I'd rather be comfortable. Well, it is a nice change and I hope your quest goes well and I look forward to your return. She smiled and I gave a slight nod in return as I left the guild. My travel to the nearest port town took a few days, but I had hired some transportation so I didn't have to walk. It was fairly uneventful and most of the time I would just read and have some conversations with the people that were in the transport. When we arrived at the port town it was mid-afternoon and the sun was going to start setting soon. I made my way to the docks and saw what seemed to be a cruise ship with a sign on the crowded dock saying it was leaving for the island I needed to go to. Approaching someone at a small building that was selling tickets, I gave the man at the window the papers I received from Luna and he read them over. He grunted. So another adventurer going on the quest, huh? I looked at him then nodded. He let out another huff as he handed me a ticket. Lots of folk died trying to kill the thing on the island and they've been trying to keep it all hush-hush, so don't go causing no panic. Has the creature been identified? Nah, anything gone near the thing either died or got wounded and died before they could tell anyone. He told me the place is real nice, so it would be unfortunate if it were closed. I got a trip planned for me and my family next week. Hopefully you're the 1-inch. I hummed and left towards the ship and was looking at my ticket. It's an all-inclusive resort and I'll be given a room on the ship. I can relax and enjoy myself on the ship and even take a few days rest at the resort after I defeat whatever is on the island. Handing my ticket to someone who was boarding people onto the ship, he asked if I had any bags and my response was no as I headed on the ship. The ship was fairly large and must have been powered by some kind of magic since it wasn't a steam liner or anything, but still looked very modern, which was weird. Families were at the railing waving goodbye to other family members, and the ship soon set sail. Dinner was being served in the dining hall almost right away, so I made my way down, and when I entered it was a very extravagant hall, to say the least. A bright chandelier was hanging in the middle of the room, and there were tables and chairs draped in white cloth, and there were windows all the way around the hall showcasing the sea, as well as a small band playing some music. This looks way too modern. Maybe someone from Earth was brought here and built it. That was the only explanation I could come up with as I was led to a table that sat 6 people. A few minutes went by before people started to arrive, all wearing fancy clothes, or Hawaiian-like clothes. My table filled up with a family of 5 consisting of a father who had a slight gut and balding/graying black hair, wearing a somewhat fancy pink short-sleeved dress shirt and khaki shorts. The wife seemed slightly younger and had long brown hair with a streak or two of white and wearing a blue sundress. The 3 kids had varying age, but the oldest seemed around 17 or so, which was a girl close to my age of 20 with long brown hair like her mom and was fairly pretty, wearing a white sundress. The other 2 kids, which were boys, must have been twins and seemed to be around 14 or 13, and they were dressed similar to their father but with white short-sleeved casual dress shirts and had black hair. They all sat down, and the 2 brothers were already having a small squabble and playing with the cutlery. The mother sighed and looked to me. "Sorry about that, they're rowdy little kids. My name's Jennifer and this is my husband Frank." He waved with a small smile. "My 2 sons Avery and Jonathan." They were still horsing around. "And my daughter Janice." She gave a timid wave and blushed when she looked at me. The mother noticed this and gave a slight giggle. "What's your name?" "Gilgamesh," was my short reply. "An interesting name. Where you from?" asked Frank. "Axel. That's the adventuring town, isn't it?" "Jennifer." "Yes it is," I responded, and the brothers seemed interested now. "Are you an adventurer?" they asked excitedly. "I am." "Cool." They shouted and started to bombard me with questions at the same time, and before I could answer any, Jennifer quieted them down as a waiter approached. We already had menus and we had just placed an order for our dinner. "Would you like some wine or anything with your dinner?" he asked, and the father asked for beer and the mother asked for wine. When he looked at me I said no and procured a wine vase and a crystal clear glass from my gate. The waiter and the family were shocked/awed, and the kids had stars in their eyes. The waiter stuttered a bit and left while I poured myself a glass, swished it around, and had a sip. After I took a sip I noticed them staring. "It's called my Gate of Babylon. It stores and preserves food, weapons, and many other things." They all either did an "oh" or an "aw." Dinner went by smoothly with all of us making small talk, but most of my answers were short, which they didn't seem to mind. Once dinner was over I excused myself so I could go to sleep, and I needed it after sleeping with a transport group for a few days. Nothing eventful happened the rest of the trip, most of it being me relaxing on the deck of the ship near a pool. It was definitely interesting having a bunch of young and some older women eyeing up my body in a pair of shorts with no shirt on and the red tattoos on my sides and right bicep. Never had people look at me thinking I'm attractive before I came to this world, was a thought I kept having. It was different, but I sure as hell didn't mind it, and it was just stares. Wasn't like anyone was doing anything, even though some were brave enough to approach me, but I declined any offers. I could act on some desires of mine, but there's a time and place for everything, I guess. I am on a cruise ship and practically on vacation, so maybe after I slay this beast I'll indulge myself. Those were some of the thoughts I had during the trip. Once we finally arrived to the island it was early morning, and the island was very impressive to say the least. The main building was what you'd see at a fancy resort back on Earth, and there were snack bars, huts handing out towels, some of what looked like the softest sand I'd ever seen, and pools with palm trees all around. The island was massive, and there was a very large forest/jungle with a small mountain behind the resort, which is where the monster was probably residing. Clad in a short-sleeve white button-up shirt with all the buttons open, black swim shorts with flames on the side, tan beach sandals and a pair of sunglasses on my head, I made my way to the main building with all the other guests. I was the first at the front desk since I didn't have to wait for any luggage, and I said I was an adventurer taking the quest posted. Once I showed my adventurer's card they led me towards the office of the owner. After I was led to the office, which was a few stories up, I entered the owner's office and saw a man who was maybe in his 40s or 50s. He looked up from some papers he was reading or signing. "Ah, so you're the next adventurer, please come sit." Making my way to the desk I sat down in a chair in front of the man. He spoke again. "Hi, I'm Mr. Tanaka, it is a pleasure to meet you." I nodded. "Alright, we'll get straight down to business. We don't have any accurate descriptions of what has been living on the island, but word is starting to get around and I don't want the reputation of my resort to go down the drain. Just tell me where you think the creature dwells and I will investigate immediately." "Eager to fight, I see." "Good." The only thing we know is that it lives on the other side of the mountain, presumably in a cave or somewhere on top of the mountain, which is more likely, and that is good since no guest has really been there, but only a handful of people know and another handful who think something is wrong. I let out a and got up to leave, but before I could leave he spoke again. If you do slay the beast, please bring back some proof and you can stay at the resort in one of the bungalows free of charge, mister. I turned slightly. Gilgamesh. With that word said, I left the office and headed down to the main lobby. Not a lot of info to go on, and that's really troublesome, but as long as I stay cautious and don't rush I should be fine. A thought then occurred to me, so I stopped in the lobby and leaned against a wall for a moment. Maybe if I focus hard enough I can see the creature. It seemed weird to think that, but there was one time I saw something while I was awake, so maybe I could do it again. I closed my eyes, crossed my arms and began to focus. I tried to focus on the dream I had before leaving, the one involving torrents of flames. Thinking back, I cleared my mind of all other thoughts and began to focus, and I saw something. The torrent of flame from my dreams returned and I could vaguely spot something in the flames. It looks like claws. Looking even further I saw more scales. I doubt it's a dragon, but maybe a salamander. No, it couldn't be. While salamanders are tough, a decent party with teamwork could slay one with some effort. Maybe it's a large wyvern or a fire drake of some kind. That must be it, but what is it doing all the way here? Before I could delve any further, a voice brought me back. Gilgamesh. I opened my eyes and looked down slightly to see it was Janice from the cruise ship. She was wearing a red bikini with a small polka dot skirt around her waist, showing off her curvy body with modest-sized breasts, and had a small straw hat on. She was fairly short, standing at about 5 feet 4 inches. I thought you looked lonely by yourself, so I thought I'd come say hello, she said with a blush and a small smile. I stared at her for a moment and gave her a slight nod. I appreciate your concern, ending off with a small smile. She seemed happy. If you wouldn't mind, would you like to go for a walk along the beach? Thinking for a moment, I responded, I'm here on a quest. She seemed sad at this. But how about this? She looked up to me with her brown eyes and seemed to be hoping I'd say yes. Once I complete my mission I'll accompany you for a whole day. She seemed ecstatic. I can't wait. I then removed her hat and ruffled her hair, which she pouted at. Letting out a chuckle, I walked off towards the resort so I could take in the sights and find a path to the forest/jungle from the resort. Realizing I was going through the resort, she quickly jogged up to me. What kind of quest are you here for? She tilted her head. I'm not really allowed to say, but I need to head into the jungle. She nodded at that and we were walking around for a bit. We talked about some small things, but she did most of the talking. Apparently her birthday was tomorrow and that's why her family is here. When we arrived at the edge of the resort and only a few minutes away from the edge there was the forest. We bid each other farewell for now and she told me to be careful as I made my way in, but I didn't turn around and I just raised my right hand to say bye. The place was full of thick vines and bushes, so progress through the jungle was really slow. Using a sword from my gate I cut through the thicket, making a path towards the mountain. One thing that caught my eye: on the way there was large claw prints on the ground in some odd places. It took almost all day just to reach the mountain, with only a few spots being clear where I didn't have to cut a path. The sun was going to set in an hour or so. Sure, this mountain isn't the largest one I've seen, but it isn't small by any means. Maybe I should climb it. If my visions are correct, and from what I've seen and heard, it's very well possible I'm dealing with a wyvern or a fire drake of some kind. And from what little I know from games and old books is that they usually live higher up in mountains. With those thoughts I approached the mountain and bent my knees. With my agility and dexterity I hopped up the mountain, using boulders and ledges as footholds to slowly make my way to the top. There were a few points I had to pull myself up some ledges, and there were even a few points there was something akin to a trail I could follow. This process continued for another hour or so till I reached the top, where it was relatively flat and was surrounded by tall rock faces almost like arena walls. And what do you know, there was a very large wyvern taking a nap. Wow, that thing is huge, it's practically the size of a dragon. If I play this carefully I should be able to beat it. Right after that thought a gust of wind blew behind me, carrying my scent to the wyvern, making its nose twitch. One eye slowly cracked open, and now it sees me. The wyvern then shot up like rocket and roared at me. There's no way that nobody heard that. I was pretty far away after all, but something that loud travels, especially on a mountain. After this thought it immediately launched into action, trying to bite me, so I jumped to the left and fired a hail of weapons from about 15 portals at its head. It recoiled and turned to unleash a torrent of flames at me. Shit, I thought as I was still in the air descending. Thinking quickly, I flashed on my armor, which spiked up my hair, and the gold earrings I wore with the armor appeared. Pulling out a shield from my gate that had a small resistance to fire, I raised it and took the full brunt of the flames. Shooting like a rocket, I crashed into a part of the mountain's walls, cracking the stone as I hit it. The shield and my armor held strong as the stream started to slow and stop. After landing on my feet I released another volley of weapons to distract the beast. Dispersing my shield and pulling out the magic red spear I got from the Death Knight's dungeon, I should name these things. I charged the beast with a faint magic aura appearing on the spear. The weapons I was firing were scratching the wyvern but not outputting enough damage, and I only had one other weapon in my gate with sufficient power to scratch it on its own. It noticed my approach and attempted to swipe at me with its tail, but in a feat of acrobatics I flipped over its tail and continued my charge to its now unguarded left side. I cracked a large portion of its scales from its side and even managed to pierce its hide a bit. I had to jump away almost immediately to avoid another torrent of flames. I'll pour some more magic into the spear and try to hit it in the same spot again if I can. It was a standoff now as I slowly circled the wyvern as it kept its eyes on me, being cautious now, probably sees me as more of a threat now, my back now facing the opposite way I came, and I sent a rush of magic to the spear and charged. When I made it close it tried to swipe me with a claw on its wing, which I managed to deflect. Moving in closer it tried to bite me, so I swiped up with the spear and its head reared back as I hit it, now aiming for its exposed throat. But as I got close it slammed its tail on the ground, causing the area to shake and my aim to falter. The spear now just nicked its neck, causing some blood to splatter on the ground. Trying to regain my balance, the wyvern smacked me with its own head and I went flying into the wall again, causing an even bigger crack than on the other wall. Slightly disoriented I looked up to see the wyvern slightly flying of the ground and charging me, so in retaliation to give myself time to get up I blasted it with a hail of weapons from 20 portals. A sword managed to hit the wyvern in its left eye. It stunned the beast, but it was still coming due to its momentum and crashed into me full force. It hit me with what felt like the force of 2 trains as the wall I was against crumbled and we both were sent tumbling down the mountain. I rolled for what felt like hours, hitting every part of my body on a rock while tumbling down. The wyvern was doing about the same as it tumbled down the mountain. We finally crashed onto the ground and got covered by some rubble. Lying under the rubble for a moment to gain my bearings, I pushed myself up slowly and managed to push my way out of the debris. Looking to my left, the wyvern was still alive as it erupted from a pile of rubble much larger than mine. It roared in defiance as it stared at me. Of course it's still up. Good thing my armor has been holding, or I would be a lot worse for wear if I didn't put it on. It shot another torrent of flames at me and I jumped to the left, firing some weapons at it. The fall must have weakened it since the barrage of weapons sent it tumbling back. Either that or my gate is getting even stronger. I grinned and summoned the first Death Knight's great sword and rushed the wyvern surrounded in a flaming golden aura. I slashed the wyvern across the chest and left a deep cut in its chest, and it was now bleeding profusely. Still having a slight flame around me, I dodged its retaliation attack from the claw on its wing, but failed to fully dodge a tail swipe, so I raised my sword to block it. I slid on the ground for a moment but was able to hold my ground as a fireball was shot at me from the air. Jumping to the right, the wyvern was now flying atop the jungle, spewing fireballs at me. Lucky I'm still close to the base of the mountain so the trees aren't catching fire. Continuing to dodge the hail of fireballs, I had an idea. Wasn't a great one, but it would work. There's a chance it'll dodge the majority of my weapon barrages with how high up it is, but I gotta try something. Over time I had acquired many chains ranging from iron to steel, so I had the gate wrap chains around my sharpest and most enchanted weapons. This'll be fun, I grinned as 20 portals or so opened behind me with various weapons sliding out and chains attached to them. The weapons shot out, all aiming to pierce the beast, and after a few minutes one sword managed to pierce the underbelly of the wyvern. I quickly grabbed on and was dragged into the air at incredible speeds. My muscles burned as I tried to pull myself towards the wyvern. It didn't help that it kept flying in circles while also doing barrel rolls. After 10 minutes of flailing through the air and firing the odd weapon to keep it from flying to the resort, I managed to swing onto its back. Grabbing the red spear from my gate, I flooded magic into the spear and rammed it through its back, making it roar in pain, but it was still up flying. I dismissed the weapon and fired all my magical and enchanted weapons at its wing, causing some damage to it. The wyvern held strong for a moment, but the weapons damaged the wing enough to cause the wyvern to spiral out of control towards the ground. Just before the beast crashed, I jumped off its back in order to sustain less fall damage as it tumbled and rolled across the ground, crushing trees and rocks alike. With a massive gouge on the earth, the wyvern slid to a stop as I approached it, calling the spear from my gate. The wyvern's scales were cracked all over and blood leaked from its wounds. Can barely wrap my head around how massive this thing is. Haven't fought a dragon yet, but it practically felt like one. With its last bit of strength it stared up at me, but it laid its head in defeat, so I charged the spear with magic power and pierced its skull, killing it. I let out a huff as I sat on the ground for a moment, letting out a light chuckle. I thought to myself, what I imagined fighting a dragon in Skyrim would be like, even though they were wyverns. This one was really massive though. It was around 3 times bigger than from something like Skyrim and definitely packed a mean punch. Opening a gate, I consumed the wyvern and stored it away in the gate. Tanaka said he wanted proof of the kill, plus I can probably make some weapons and whatnot from its bones and hide. Looking up to the sky, I saw that it was a beautiful orange and pink color. Haven't watched a sunset in years, even when I went on vacation to Cuba with my family. I admired the sunset for a few minutes, then I decided to slowly get up and head back to the resort. I'm tired as hell, so I'll relax and head to sleep before I go and inform Tanaka. I flashed off my armor and went back to my vacation outfit with my hair down and earrings off. It took a while to get back to the resort since I had to go around the mountain, but when I got back on the path I came from, it was smooth sailing from there. Arriving back to the resort about an hour before midnight, I heard some music in the distance. Seems to be a party on the beach. Might as well go, I shrugged and made my way towards the beach, and when I arrived there was a large bonfire with people dancing, singing and drinking, while a few workers made sure no one fell into the fire or got too rowdy. I surveyed the beach for a place to sit when I noticed Janice and her family having fun. Jen and Frank were definitely drunk and the two boys were nowhere to be seen, probably asleep in their room. Thinking of an idea, I let a grin appear on my face as I snuck behind Janice. Leaning forward towards her ear, I whispered, "Boo." She then made a loud beep, as she jumped from her seat and almost fell on the sand. Her parents and I let out a hearty laugh as she turned and pouted at me, but after a few minutes of all of us laughing we quieted down. Then she spoke to me. "Did you finish your quest?" she asked, excitedly happy to see me. "Indeed." "What was your quest?" "I know you said you couldn't tell me, but it's over now, right?" I motioned them all to lean towards me, which they did, and I whispered, "I killed a massive wyvern." They seemed shocked as I let out a small chuckle. It was a difficult battle, but not the hardest battle I've fought. They thanked me after I told them, since they didn't know, plus now they know everything is safe. Retrieving a chair with my gate, I sat down. "What was harder than a massive wyvern?" asked Frank. "My grandfather was an adventurer and he fought some massive wyverns in his time." "It was a death knight." "Death knight," they exclaimed. "Yes, the thing damn near killed me, ran me through my stomach with this spear," I said, and opened a gate to show them the red barbed spear. They were shocked to say the least. "How did that happen?" "I don't see a scar," said Janice while looking at my abdomen. I chuckled. "If you want to look at my abs, just ask," ending off with a smirk. She sputtered and looked away as me and her parents chuckled before speaking again. "In all seriousness, I was overpowered and pushed against a wall where I was stabbed. I got healed by some clerics and I already heal fairly well, plus I had a friend to watch over me while I recovered." They asked a few more questions about my adventures, but I left out all the more gruesome details, like catching the decapitated head of an acquaintance. After a few moments there was silence as we all stared at the ocean's calming waves, with me taking some sips of wine from a glass while relaxing on my chair. A thought then occurred to me. "It's past midnight, is it not?" "I would assume so," said Jen. "Janice, hold out your hand." She seemed confused but held out her hand. "Close your eyes." As she closed her eyes, I opened a small gate above her hand and something small fell into it. "Now open." She opened her eyes and let out a small gasp. It was a silver necklace with a blue pendant and it sparkled in the moonlight. She seemed happy but confused on why I gave her a necklace. I chuckled before responding, "Happy birthday." It then clicked as she thanked me and put the necklace on. "How's it look?" she asked everyone. The responses were all that it looked good/beautiful, and she blushed from the praise. She thanked me once more and we all lapsed into silence again for another few minutes before I stood and dismissed my chair. "I am tired from today's events, so I shall retire for the night." Jen and Frank said they would stay for a while, but Janice seemed tired as she said she was going to head to sleep as well. She followed me towards the main lobby, and when we arrived she turned to me. "Where is your room?" "It's just down this path to the right," I said while pointing down a branching path of the lobby leading towards some bungalows. "It's the fourth one on the right if I'm not mistaken." "Our places are fairly close together," she said. "Ours is the second one on the left." After that we walked towards our rooms in silence. It was nice. We took our time, but I could notice her sneaking a few glances at me. When we finally arrived to her place she turned to me. "Thanks again for the necklace. I know we barely know each other, but I appreciate it." "No worries, my treasury is vast. A simple necklace for a friend is no issue." "Still thank you." She turned to enter her place when she stopped for a moment. "Something wrong?" Not saying anything, she quickly turned around and went on the tips of her toes to peck me on the cheek. Before I was able to say anything she rushed into the room, presumably embarrassed she did that. Letting out a small chuckle I turned and left. Michael would probably be blushing up a storm right now, but still that was partially unexpected. I thought, making my way into my room, "This is gonna be a nice trip." The morning was fairly uneventful and it mostly just consisted of me taking a bath and having my gate prepare a small breakfast before I headed out in my vacation clothes. The sky only had a few clouds dotting it and there was a light gentle breeze from time to time that was cool and refreshing when it got too hot. First order of business, meet with Tanaka and discuss my reward. I had a few ideas on what I wanted, but I'd need to discuss them with him. I didn't stop anywhere and I went straight to where Tanaka's office was. When I arrived, I pushed open the door to see him in the same position as before. He looked up from his papers and regarded me with a small smile. "Ah, it is good to see you again. Were you successful in your mission?" he asked. I stayed at the entrance of his office and wordlessly opened a large portal and the wyvern's head slowly slid out. I didn't bring out the whole body as it wouldn't fit in the office, but the head itself practically took the whole area up. He jumped slightly in shock. My word. That was up on the mountain. A dragon. No, it was a wyvern, an incredibly large one at that. Amazing. I assumed defeating it was difficult. I've fought a stronger being than this, but it was still a challenge. At the top of the mountain there is a flat arena-like area where I initially fought it, but in a series of events we were sent through a wall and fell down the mountain where I eventually defeated it. I then dismissed the head back to my gate. "Well then, let us discuss your reward," he said while pulling out a checkbook of some kind. "I have another idea for my reward." He looked up from the book and stared at me with his head tilted to the side. The mountain may be a little too difficult for some people to get up, but there were some paths that led up there. My idea was to give you money to make an attraction at the top and most of the profits would go to me. He seemed surprised. "You want to set up a tourist attraction on my island? Why not money for the reward? If you agree to this I would eventually have a steady flow of money, so if I'm ever put out of work I can still receive money," I responded. He closed his eyes in thought for a moment and then responded, "That would surely attract more people and we can label it an excursion for a decent price." He opened his eyes. "That would take a lot of Eris. Are you sure you'd want to pay for that? You'll receive some money from it, but it wouldn't be much." "That's where my other idea comes into play." He seemed interested. "Since I slayed the wyvern and would be willing to pay for construction to have a safe place be made to reach the top of the mountain, I would like a place of residence here as well." "You want to live here?" He seemed confused. "Not live here, but have a small share in this place through the attraction and be able to visit the island as I please when I need a vacation." He thought for another moment. "This is definitely a strange request. How much would you be willing to pay for a place to live and the attraction?" 2 million. The room went silent. T2 million? He seemed stumped. "I recently completed a quest and received that much as a reward. I want to invest in something to have a steady flow of money and a place to escape to when I need it." I then opened up a gate and dropped a massive bag of coins and cash onto his desk, rattling the desk, and you could hear a loud creak as it hit. Tanaka jumped and stared at the bag for a moment before opening it, and he had some stars in his eyes looking at all the money. I chuckled. "Do we have a deal?" He immediately nodded. "Very well. Get some documents written up so I may sign them." "Susan!" Mr. Tanaka yelled out. Then a young woman with black hair and a large bust wearing a business suit with high heels opened the door. He then relayed what we had decided together and told her to get some paperwork ready, and she left shortly after to write them up. He stuck his hand out towards me. "It'll take a day or two to get everything ready and cleared up, and the attraction will take a month or so to build and make safe, but I look forward to doing business with you." I shook his hand, then had the money sent back to my gate. "When the papers are being signed I will give you the money to count." He nodded. "Understandable. Please enjoy the rest of your stay." Our hands separated and I left the office towards the resort. After the meeting the rest of my vacation went by in a blur, and there weren't really any more events that stood out. There was Janice's birthday where I attended a few events they had, but I thought the family would want some time together, so I distanced myself a bit. The interactions we did have over the next few days were fairly humorous since she avoided my gaze for a little bit. She apologized at one point, but I saw no harm and even teased her by leaning close to her one time and saying, "If you want to do it again, but on the lips, all you need to do is ask." Her reaction was priceless, and I had one of my Gil laughs at her expense, but we both had fun the short time we did spend together the rest of the trip. Did I feel anything towards her? Not particularly, but she was a very pretty woman. When the day finally came to leave we all boarded the ship and began our long 2-week sail back to the port town. But not before meeting Tanaka to hand him the money and sign some papers to become business partners. Nothing interesting happened on the way back either. The time was mostly spent reading to pass the boredom and whatnot. But when we did arrive back to land, Janice approached me as I was walking off to find transport back to Axel. "Will I ever see you again?" she asked with a sad but hopeful face. I chuckled lightly and ruffled her hair a bit before turning around and giving her a wave. "I will return to go on vacation. I'll visit when I stop by in town." She then waved and said goodbye, but I didn't turn around and just kept going. "Well, after I get home in a few days it's gonna be back to work," I thought to myself while hiring a mode of transportation. "I hope my home is still intact." I grimaced slightly. "I swear if my place is trashed I'm gonna be pretty mad." Arriving back in Axel now in my casual wear with the black jacket, I went straight to the guild as it was midday and I wanted to inform Luna that the quest was complete. When I arrived to the doors it was strangely quiet. Usually there is a commotion going on or some drunkards yelling. When I opened the doors the guild was entirely empty other than Luna, who seemed extremely worried pacing around. Luna, her head snapped to me. "Oh, thank the gods you're back," she rushed over to me. I was confused. "I know you like me, but I wasn't expecting such forwardness." She then shook her head. "You have to head to the front of town now." I tilted my head slightly. "There's a Demon King General at the front gates again." Now that got my attention. "Again?" "There's no time to explain, go help everyone." Right after she said that I felt a rumble as the building shook a little. I expanded my senses to the front gate of town and sensed a lot of high-tier undead die and one undead with dark power leagues above almost everything I've ever fought till now. Nodding to Luna, I set out at a brisk jog towards the main gate. It didn't take me long to reach the gate, and when I did I saw a massive crowd of adventurers blocking the main gate. What in the hell is going on? This caught everyone's attention as they turned around. Noticing me they all started to seem happy to see me and they all exclaimed my name. When I moved forward they parted the way and what greeted my vision was darkness in front of a massive Dullahan in black/grey armor that had a small cape carrying its own head and wielding a massive almost glass-looking sword. Kazuma was behind him a ways back with Megumin on his shoulders and Aqua nearby him. The Dullahan turned to me as I approached the front of the crowd and stood by Darkness. "Gilgamesh, you're back." Darkness, Kazuma, Aqua and Megumin all exclaimed. "And what makes this guy so special now, huh?" said the deep voice of the Dullahan. "I've had it with all you crazy people. I'm gonna swat you all like flies." A large dark aura overtook him as a weight was set in the air. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. I squinted my eyes. "Like a fly you say?" My blood started to get warm as a familiar attitude rose up. "Yeah. I don't care who I have to kill, but you all pissed me off for the last time." His aura grew slightly. With those words uttered I flashed on my armor as my hair defied gravity and 20 or so gates opened behind me, weapons of various kinds sliding out slowly. I crossed my arms and tilted my head down slightly, shadowing the majority of my face, going into my somewhat newly dubbed intimidation pose. "You should be careful what you say," I said calmly, but all my gilitude was slipping through. "Mongrel." The whole area was silent. The only thing you could hear was the gentle breeze and the hum of the Gate of Babylon as it ominously glowed a few feet in front of the Demon King General. It wasn't long till the crowd of adventurers started to mumble that we may actually win even without some other guy. Probably the kid with the magic sword that one-hit stuff. "I'm going to ask this one more time," said the general. "This town is supposed to be full of weaklings and low-level adventures. We have a crusader that resisted my death curse, a priest who can harm me with a simple turn undead spell who supposedly lifted said curse, and a freaking little kid who wiped out a horde of minions in one spell. And now everyone thinks you'll beat me when these guys could barely. Just who are you?" I stared him down, my gaze not faltering in the slightest. "You heard the masses say my name, but you do not deserve to hear it from my lips." After those words I unleashed a hail of weapons at the general and I showed no signs of stopping. The general was blown back several meters before he righted himself and managed to block an onslaught before doing something different. He barely managed to toss his head in the air, and when it reached its peak a rush of magic poured from the head, engulfing the surrounding area in a blanket of orange energy. A glowing eye appeared behind the head as the general moved so fast and fluidly I could barely follow his movements. He deflected the weapons I sent to him like Quicksilver, or the Flash would deflect and dodge bullets. Seeing as the classic bombard the enemy strategy wasn't working, it was best to take a different approach. Opening another gate, I brought forward the Death Knight's great sword and held it to my side, waiting to rush the general. Darkness, who was still beside me, turned to me. "Let's team up like we did before and take him down." She seemed serious. I turned my gaze towards her slightly. "You take the hits and get your drawers twisted." She pouted and I smirked slightly. "Fine, let us kill this thing." She nodded as we rushed the Dullahan. The general caught his head and glared at us as we rushed him. On the approach I shot weapons at him which he was forced to block. Darkness reached him first and clashed with the general, causing a small crack in the ground and a small bit of earth to shoot up. Their clash only lasting a few moments, with the general ending it by using his strength to push Darkness' sword in the air, leaving her open. She seemed ecstatic before I joined the fray, with my sword glowing as I struck the knight from the side, which made him slide back a few feet. Not wanting to hear her complain at all, I rushed the knight, engaging in a whirlwind of blades with neither of us gaining or losing ground. I then started to blast him from multiple angles as we circled each other while clashing to add an extra bit of difficulty for the general. It didn't take long before the general started to lose ground, which Darkness saw and rushed in. Going in for an attack she missed, unsurprisingly, but continued to attack with the general dodging her blows. When I drew closer ready to attack with more weapons and swings, the general said, "Enough." A pulse of dark magic energy caused us both to stumble slightly, which he took advantage of by tossing his head in the air, doing the same thing he did earlier. Realizing the danger, I tried to blast him with weapons, but he literally adopted a stride as he blocked or dodged any weapons and managed to hit me, sending me flying. Turning his attention to darkness, he proceeded to start demolishing her by hitting her with as many strikes as he could. When his head finally dropped into his open hand, darkness was kneeling on the ground and her armor was starting to fall off. Everyone seemed worried as she fell to one knee using her sword as a crutch, but I knew she was enjoying this somehow. "Do not worry," she spoke, "it is my duty to protect all of you as a crusader. Plus this man is truly vile in where he chose to strike me." She started to blush as the general seemed confused. I face-palmed as she went on a rant about how he was shaving her armor off in specific places to show of which pieces of her body he liked the most. I stood and ran over to her as she was still ranting, and the general started to yell confusedly and was about to hit her again. "This one aimed to kill, enough with your perverseness, you masochist," I said, and she looked at me with shock as I kicked her away, causing her to shout with bliss. Turning to the general, I went on the offensive once more, but with the advantage as he was still fairly confused. Pumping magic into the sword, causing it to have a slight gold flame to it, I hit the general back, causing him to skid along the ground. When he stopped, we stared at each other for a moment before he spoke. "I haven't had to push myself like this for a very long time. I think it's about time I get serious." His stance went relaxed as his sword went to his side. The already dark clouds grew thicker as it seemed like night time. His dark black and purple aura slowly rose off his body as the rumble of thunder could be heard in the distance. Lightning struck around the area, spooking the other adventurers. "Now let Verdia end this game." The now named Verdia shot off like a rocket, and in response I tried to slow him down by blasting him, but he literally barreled through or deflected every weapon sent his way. He clashed into me and I had to focus all my magic power into my sword to block his attack. He then started to laugh as he tossed his head in the air, doing his overpowered attack. Now that he had two hands and even more of his power increased, my blade got deflected into the air, still humming with magic, so I sent a weapon from the gate to hit the pommel of the sword, but it only dented his armor as he hit me with what felt like 1,000 attacks. The final hit sent me back with a chunk of my shoulder piece flying off and some blood to escape my mouth. After coming to a stop, I managed to get up in time to swiftly dodge an overhead strike from Verdia, and as fast as I could I pulled out the great sword again and pumped it with a vast portion of my magic. I practically exploded with a golden flame-like aura as my power increased momentarily. The ground shook as I swung my sword at Verdia and he blocked the attack. A small crater formed on impact, sending dirt and dust flying everywhere. The momentary boost in power from the sword was slowly fading as Verdia started to gain more ground, pushing me back ever so slowly. "Damn it," I thought as my arms started to burn. "At this rate I'm gonna have another incident like the last Death Knight." I got pushed to one knee as the flaming aura was but a flickering flame. "If I pull a stunt like last time I'm just gonna get myself killed." I was approaching the end when someone yelled out, "Create water." It was Kazuma. Verdia heard this and leapt back as a small torrent of water almost hit him. "I have a plan, keep him distracted." Darkness then appeared in front of me and rushed Verdia, trying to hit him, but all she managed to do was slice chunks from the earth and slice boulders clean in half as Verdia dodged all of her attacks with ease. Trusting in Kazuma for the moment, I dashed forwards using all the advantages of my gait and being able to enhance myself momentarily to bombard him, while Darkness and I pressed the attack with me occasionally boosting my power. Verdia was still able to fend off my attacks since Darkness was missing all of hers, but it was enough to get him annoyed. His anger increased as he shouted, causing a magic pulse to make us stumble slightly, which he took advantage of by kicking me away, but I managed to send off the red magic spear charged with magic and some other enchanted weapons effective against undead at him. The initial assault was some basic enchanted weapons, with the spear being fired last. It managed to slip past his defenses and pierce him through the middle of his chest, the red aura exploding out. Still standing and incredibly angry after being hit, he hit Darkness as hard as he possibly multiple times, causing her to rocket off. Verdia then rushed her and stood over her, raising his sword to impale her. As a former knight, I can't thank the Demon King enough for giving me a chance to fight a powerful but clumsy crusader and another powerful adventurer. But this battle ends here. Just as he thrust his sword down, a chorus of voices came from the city gate. "Create water! Create water! Create water! Create water! Create water!" Multiple streams of water appeared, causing Verdia to jump back and dodge all the streams. He was undead, so obviously water is his weakness, but I didn't have very many weapons to combat undead enemies that wasn't fire related. Kazuma was leading a bunch of mages as they unleashed torrents of water at Beldia, causing him to yell at the adventurers while he moved. "I'll get that sword." "Steal," shouted Kazuma, trying to use the steal spell and retrieve Beldia's massive sword. But as the light died down, Verdia stood still and nothing seemed to have changed. "Ha ha ha. Fool. You really believe a simple spell like that would work on me?" Verdia prepared to throw his head. As he launched his head into the air, I knew no one would stand a chance, so I charged the red spear in my gate with every single bit of magic I had left, dropping it to 0 and had it slowly slide out the gate. The spear looked like it was on fire, with the flames being the size and intensity of the flames the wyvern had. "Not on my watch, mongrel," I shouted, causing the spear to launch like a rocket, smashing into a shield of magic forming around Verdia's head. The spear pushed against the barrier like a Dragon Ball key blast struggle would go down, causing an explosion of force. The spear struggled for a few moments as it finally smashed through and impacted Verdia's head. He shouted as it stuck him and traveled towards the city wall. Crashing into the wall and causing a small explosion that left a gaping hole in it, his head clattered to the ground, but you could still hear and see that it was still alive. "Aqua," shouted Kazuma, "be useful for once and hit him with water." They seemed to argue for a moment, but then Aqua was surrounded by blue wisps of magic and a magic circle appeared underneath her. After the chant, a hole appeared within the clouds, illuminating the area around Verdia as he looked into the sky. Come oh dash. Before he could finish his words, a gargantuan amount of water fell from the sky, impacting Verdia. The only bad thing to happen was the fact that it caused a tsunami-like effect that destroyed even more of the wall and swept away all the nearby adventurers, including me. Now I was soaked and my hair was let down, and the majority of my armor minus the gauntlets and legs were still attached. It took a few minutes for all the water to disappear, but the whole area was now soaking wet. But when the water cleared, Verdia was still standing and his head was now in my possession as it had rolled over to me after the tsunami. His body was barely standing, but he was still alive and my mana was barely starting to regenerate. I started to chuckle. "It seems this battle is over." I had a shit-eating grin, which Verdia responded with some low growls and curses. Darkness stumbled up to me. "He is weakened, it's best we end him now." I nodded to that. Aqua then summoned a staff as another magic circle appeared beneath her. "Sacred turn undead," she shouted as a pillar of light erupted underneath Beldia's body. Letting out another chuckle, I tossed his head up and down before adopting a baseball throwing stance. "And no," was Verdia's response as I threw his head over to the ever-growing pillar of light and his disintegrating body. I let out another chuckle as he screamed once more, his body now completely disintegrated. The sun then started to peek out from spots in the clouds as everyone looked up to the sky, one of the rays shining directly onto me as I continued to stare. Just when I returned from a quest/vacation, I'm immediately thrust into battle once more, with a demon general no less. "I'm sorry we couldn't deal with him sooner," said Darkness next to me. Turning to her and smiling slightly while illuminated by the sun, Darkness blushed at my gaze. "You did fine." I then brought her into a one-arm side hug. "Now let us return and celebrate this victory." She continued to blush as she was pressed against me. Walking over to everyone, they were all cheering at Verdia's death when Ruffian, who was among the adventurers, saw us approach. "And here come the front-line fighters." Everyone started to cheer as I unwrapped my arm from Darkness as she seemed sheepish from the praise. When everyone made it back to the guild, the ensuing party was crazy. Everyone was either drinking or passed out from drinking. The only person not drinking seemed to be Megumin, as everyone said she was too young. Now dressed in my casual clothes with the leather jacket, I let out a grimace after taking a sip of this so-called beer they had. "Tastes like piss," I thought to myself, but finished the mug nevertheless. After placing the mug, I looked at my adventurer card. Damn, the level up for that was amazing. I had leveled up a considerable amount. Swiping over to the tab that held the powers for my gate, one of the locked slots was able to be viewed. Mystic eyes, I mumbled to myself. Pressing on the tab and spending the required skill points, a whole new tree of options opened up. Precognition abilities, appraisal skills, and more. Killing Verdia seemed to have unlocked a new skill tree, and it was for my eyes. Damn, with precognition I can predict moves. That's insanely useful. While I have been able to catch glimpses of the future before, this can make fights even easier. Costs a lot of points though. Deciding that it was worth it, I grabbed a precognition skill which could be upgraded, and I also grabbed the appraisal skill, so now I could look at a person or object and know things about it. The skill can still be upgraded so I could get more insight to objects and people, but it will definitely be of use. With those upgrades taking a large portion of my points, I put the rest into my gate since I need it stronger. While I don't want to become too dependent on it like Gil actually was, I still really need to get its power increased. I've had to resort to melee combat way too often against stronger foes, which isn't a bad thing since I find it fun, but I should still probably upgrade it more. Sending my card back to my gate, I procured some wine to drink. That beer was awful. After cleansing my palate with a few sips, I started to relax more. Gazing at the crowd of people who were still partying, Ruffian stood from his spot. "Let's raise a mug to Gilgamesh and Kazuma's party." Cheers resounded throughout the guild as they all chanted our names. I chuckled lightly while continuing to drink by myself when Luna approached. "Could you come with me, please? I need to discuss the reward with you and Kazuma." Nodding to her, I stood up, dismissed my wine, and followed her to the entrance where Kazuma and his party were waiting. They gave me waves on my approach as Luna spoke. "Now that you're all here, I wanted to discuss your reward." "Only us?" I asked. Ruffian spoke from a distance. "You all helped defeat a demon king general. You're the heroes this world needs. Of course you guys get the reward." Luna gave a small smile. "That's right, so the reward for you all is 300 million Eris." To say we were surprised was an understatement. The guild was all excited, saying we should buy rounds for everyone as their chanting increased. Kazuma then raised his hand. "All right. Meeting time." They started to huddle as I approached. Aqua immediately spoke first. "I took him out so I should get 90%. I then smacked her on the head, giving her a small glare. "Okay, fine, we'll split it evenly." "I don't care as long as I get enough money to retire," started Kazuma. "Seriously, I'm done adventuring already." "Wait," the other three spoke. "Not waiting." They started to argue, trying to prevent him from quitting, but he seemed resolute and I didn't particularly care. The argument continued till Luna approached Kazuma with a note and his face went blank. "Aqua's water did destroy a large portion of the walls and you guys did kill a demon general, so I can't get you to pay it all, but if you could pay a portion, that would be great." I gave a small hearty laugh at his now crestfallen expression and patted him on the shoulder. "For someone with luck comparable to mine to have this much bad luck is amusing." I let out another laugh. "Wait a minute," shouted Kazuma/Aqua, "you blew a hole in the wall, why do we have to cover it?" Giving them a side glance, I responded, "I may have put a sizable hole in the wall, but you," point to Aqua, "destroyed the whole area. If I hadn't done that, you still would have destroyed it, making my damage insignificant." They lowered their heads at that. Darkness then spoke. "Well, now it seems we must go on quests with tough monsters for a while longer." His head hung low for a moment till he looked up at me. "Hey Gil." I glanced at him. "I hate to ask, especially since you let us stay at your place, but is there any way you could help us out? I don't have that much money since I just bought a house." "You got 2 million from the cabbage quest, didn't you?" Luna said, shocking the group. Turning to her, I spoke. "I spent it." She seemed surprised. "How?" "The resort quest," I went on. I killed a massive wyvern and instead of a reward I used the 2 million to fund the mountain I initially fought on to be turned into an excursion so I could have a steady source of income. I also got a plot of land on the island so I can go there whenever I choose. I also am going to be working with the owner to have a small stake in some profits." Luna's eyes widened. "Oh wow, that's amazing. As much as I love fighting strong ravenous enemies, a vacation would be nice." Darkness. Glancing at her, "I'm allowed to return whenever I please with guests, but I will need to wait till I receive a letter from Mr. Tanaka to say that my house is ready. Anyways, I shall retire for the night." I turned to leave. Before I could leave, Darkness tapped my shoulder. Turning around, she was holding the spare keys I left her. "What about these?" "Hold on to them," I dismissed with a wave. "I trust you to hold on to them. You are free to visit if you like." She nodded, pocketing the keys. Spoke Kazuma, rubbing his arm. "We still don't have a place to stay. Is it alright if we stay there another few days just to get back on our feet from this financial blow?" Letting out a sigh, I nodded, and then Aqua practically jumped on my arm. "Thank you so much. Get off me, you useless goddess." I started to push her off before she dirted my jacket. After I pushed her off, I straightened my jacket and started to leave. Not wanting to be left behind, the group followed, Darkness and Megumin included. "I get these two," pointing to Aqua and Kazuma, "but why you two?" "You said I was free to visit," spoke Darkness. "I guess I did. But what about you?" towards Megumin. She seemed to fidget for a moment. I didn't want to be left behind. What about the party? Do you not wish to party?" "Well, I personally didn't want to be left outside if I didn't show up to your house in time," spoke Kazuma as Aqua agreed. "While I don't mind the drunken men lusting over my body, ready to go at me like a pack of wild dogs, I would like to spend time with you as I have not seen you in a time." Guess who said that? Letting out a chuckle, I nodded. "I am pretty amazing, I guess." If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.